Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and educator Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue features a melting pot of topics, ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. This is the 5th episode of Season 5, and Ann, we've got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right into the flame and talk about what is hot this week.
Okay, well, the first thing is an observation, Haley. I'm curious. So Haley and I are on a Zoom platform, so I'm seeing her, but so many podcasts now you can watch. And I'm thinking to myself, thank God people don't watch this. I mean, at least on my end, because I'm like, right now I'm holding my temple, like my forehead. I have a pen, I'm just like, it's the end of the school day. I don't want anyone to see this. So I'm wondering, do you ever watch
the whole podcast? So I have to say,
not listen.
Oh,
watch
yes,
a podcast.
I have watched a podcast, but it's funny that you mentioned that because usually we oftentimes tape at night, and I've already showered. I have no makeup on. I usually am in maybe not quite my pajamas, but clearly house clothes. And I just walked in from work, so I actually think I look pretty good right now. So this is one that I wouldn't mind people watching. But yes, I have watched them, and I can see the wisdom in that. I know that's not exactly what a podcast is for. For me, it's really more about listening, but I do enjoy watching clips from it.
Why? I'm curious. Like, what is it that you enjoy when you...
That's, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. I think it's because maybe I watch the clips on social media and they kind of wrote me in, and maybe that's really more what it's for. I have to say, I listen to podcasts mostly in the car when I'm not listening to my audiobooks. So I should say I don't know if I've ever watched a full podcast start to finish, but I have watched the clips, and I do enjoy seeing what people look like. Because when you only hear their voice, they could possibly look different than how they sound. So I take it you don't listen to podcasts, or you don't watch them.
I mean, I don't. But what you said resonates. Like, I don't listen to New Heights, which is Travis Kelce and his brother Jason. But I do see clips on Instagram. I think they are so animated. They're so funny, and even the production value on those video clips is well done. So as a teaser, it's great. There's no doubt about it. I love their animation. I think they're both handsome, but that wouldn't be why I would be watching that, in particular.
But some people might. That could be a draw for some people.
Well, they talk about the radio voice for a reason, that there's a reason so-and-so's on radio. So I'm getting away with a couple of things on the podcast here, perhaps, like I said, just looking like a mess and stressed out and not fitting the television profile in appearance, but that's okay. I just thought of that idea, because I have seen also, I watch in the morning at the gym. You'll see these shows that are just dedicated to the analysis of football. And it's several men sitting in a living room just talking. Mm-hmm. Now, is that really that much different than several, and usually there's one woman now, which is good to have the voice at the table, but they're sitting around a table. So it's just a more formal iteration of a bunch of people sitting on couches or bar stools, which is
right.
Yes, which is with intention and talking points and organization. But I see, if you will, a continuum among all of this production and purpose. So wanted to throw that up there.
Yeah, no, great. Definitely something to think about.
Yeah, listeners, you will not be seeing this podcast anytime soon. So continuing on with the melting pot, with the flame, excuse me. Okay, we are at the halfway point of Lent, Haley.
Already?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that right, though? Because
it could be. We only have about 3 weeks till Easter.
We're closing in on it.
Okay.
We're closing in on it, and there should be a name for it. Gaudete. There's the one in Advent, and then okay. Anyways, we're halfway through, and I've just noticed, because we're looking ahead to Holy Week and offerings, just to familiarize our faculty with what will be offered during Holy Week, during the Triduum and whatnot. And I've just been so impressed with the wide variety and churches in the San Francisco Archdiocese of just different ways to engage in Lent. Everything from, you have your traditional Stations of the Cross on Friday, or soup suppers. My parish is offering that on Fridays, which is something I've been wanting to go to. A lot of places it's cultural to have a fish fry. But during Holy Week, there's even more extensive offerings. So I don't know if that's on your radar, if you have paid attention or participated in any sort of Lenten offerings near you.
Not during, I haven't thought ahead to Holy Week beyond just what will we be doing Easter Sunday, who's coming home, who's not coming home. I did this past Sunday, and this is part of my flame as well. And this is probably the fourth year that it's happened to work out this way. I've been invited to speak at a Lenten retreat. Mm-hmm. So that was never part of my Lenten experience before, attending a Lenten retreat. But it has been over these past 4 years because I've been invited to attend and speak at one. And this one in particular was different than ones in the past. It was the Life Teen group. So there were about 200 teenagers. And then it was also the adult group as well. So they had separate components to their weekend, but then for the culminating speaker, they came together, which I thought was really neat. So bringing the adults and the young people together. It was interesting for me because I was speaking in the church, and they had roped off one side for the students and one side for the adults. And so I really had two very different audiences. And of course, my story is my story, and I love speaking at either faith-based schools or churches, certainly, because I can share my faith journey. And that's the whole reason I was there, was to share the faith element of my story, which I appreciate so much. But it's very different talking to 13, 14, 15-year-olds versus adults who have really experienced more in life. But that is certainly something that is offered, that I am seeing more and more, that I had not participated in, that I'm really enjoying it being kind of more of an annual event for me. And I think if I am not invited to speak at one, I'll need to seek one out.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great time to take a retreat. And, these 40 days, Jesus mirrors Jesus' time in the desert, which was his time for retreat and prayer, rejuvenation. So a great recommendation. And I appreciate how they've organized that retreat. I think that's very wise to have speaking to your own kind of life pieces, but then the common experience. I think that would be great for a family. So kudos to Life Teen. Is that what?
So Life Teen is a national organization. Are you familiar with them? Yes. So they have chapters. It's actually it was founded by a Notre Dame grad, one of my classmates, Mark Hart. He was one of the original founders of Life Teen. It started in Scottsdale, in Phoenix. He is from Arizona, and I knew him a little bit, but really got to know him better at Notre Dame. And we reconnected. This is an interesting story, kind of a side note. We reconnected when, however many years it's been now, when the Pope resigned. And I was at a different place in my faith journey at that point. I didn't know popes could resign. It, obviously hadn't happened in hundreds of years. Whether they should and could, obviously is two different conversations. But I was fascinated by this. And so I went on Sirius Radio to the Catholic channel to hear what they had to say about it, because I was just looking for all this information when the news first broke. And there was someone on the Catholic channel on Sirius Radio called the Bible Geek. And they started talking about the Bible Geek, and he was all knowledgeable and sharing everything. And I kept listening, and they said his name was Mark Hart. And I thought, Mark Hart, how many Mark Harts could there be that are that embedded in their faith? And so he had a Sirius Radio show, the Bible Geek, and he helped started Life Teen. But it's a pretty big national organization. I've spoken at their national conference, it's a program for youth and teens that Catholic churches can adopt.
Great. Well, yeah, I'm curious. I will definitely take a look and learn a little bit more.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear more about him too. He might be an interesting guest on the show.
He would, for sure. He's dynamic.
That's great. Yeah. Well, moving ahead to Holy Week, there are a couple of very unique opportunities. One example that I encountered was an opportunity in San Francisco to deliver Easter cards and treats to the county jails. So San Francisco is the city and the county, but that delivery and visitation would be on Holy Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I know a couple of years ago, Pope Francis did reconciliation on Holy Thursday. He did it in juvenile hall, but really that call to visit those who are in prison.
Right.
So I thought that might be a meaningful ministry. And there are a number of active ways to engage in the Triduum. So Holy Thursday, Good Friday. They don't say as much about Holy Saturday, but one is a Sacred Spaces tour in San Francisco. So former, now retired Catholic school educator has identified these historic churches and their stories and their communities in this area of San Francisco called Holy Hill, and takes you on a tour of all those. So I thought that was, an interesting way. It doesn't relate necessarily to the tradition of Holy Thursday. So for those that want that, there's a Camino, a Holy Week Camino, and it's part of this Camino de San Francisco. So the week you can do any number of parts of this Camino. And as somebody who I know have done a pilgrimage, this might be appealing to you, but they divided it up from like the North Bay, Sonoma County, maybe even further, and they're going to walk and they'll end up in San Francisco at the Mission.
Okay.
And on Holy Thursday, it's like from Mission San Rafael, which is in San Rafael, and they walk to basically the Golden Gate Bridge, but then they return to this parish for Mass and, Holy Thursday Mass, reenactment of the Last Supper. But there's another day on Good Friday, they have the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is the San Francisco side, and they're walking through San Francisco to the Mission, where again, they'll have, it's technically not Mass on Good Friday, it's a reenactment of the liturgy, but one day we don't have, the liturgy of the Eucharist, so to speak. We just reenact it. So, but those were just great ways to get people moving and praying and engaged in, time with the Lord that week.
Okay, fascinating. The Camino de Santiago is on my bucket list that I don't really have, but it is something I will do at some point. And I know there's multiple routes, but I've also been really fascinated there. And I don't know how long the Camino de San Francisco has been around, and maybe you don't either, but I can guarantee you as soon as we wrap up today, I'm going to Google it and figure it out. But there are a number of Caminos in the United States. There is a Camino in Wisconsin. There's one down in kind of St. Augustine, Jacksonville area. And I am fascinated by them. To me, they seem, I don't know why, maybe a little easier to go do than flying over to Europe. But what a wonderful way to spend Holy Week.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look into that. Do you know how many miles it is? Is it 100 kilometers? Kind of like the real Camino?
Good question.
Okay, I'm going to look it up
each day. Yeah. So invitation, more to, we're only pointing the way here.
Absolutely.
Listeners, of ideas. And, I did the Camino Ignaciano in Spain, but, you did definitely the Notre Dame Trail,
right? And
the relationships and the prayer and the time, I'm sure, was so formative. So I think it's, based on your enthusiasm and interest, I think it's, a wise way to spend some really important days in the life of the church together. And, it doesn't have to be. It's outside of a church, but then it's also the opportunity to be inside the church too.
Well, as Jesus says, wherever one or more gathers in my name, or two or more gather in my name, it's the church is everywhere.
Yeah, and moving.
And moving. I truly can't think of I can't think of a better way actually to spend Holy Week. I find myself at times, some more than others, just craving a pilgrimage and craving that quiet time, and I love to walk. It's much easier for me than sitting still. And for me, that's a spiritual journey in its own way. So I will definitely be looking into that.
Yeah, and I think that resonates with a lot of people, because just to be outside, to be on the
Mm-hmm.
go, to be disconnected from tech,
Yes.
the temptation for it, just to be, with each other too, I think is meaningful.
The
And
connection.
yeah, and in a few months, hopefully people can take a Camino on campus at the University of Notre Dame with my book.
I
So more on
can't
that, more
wait.
as it unfolds. So stay
Okay,
tuned.
TBD,
Yeah,
stay tuned. Little
yeah.
teaser.
I might need a forward from you, Haley, or an
I can
endorsement
write
if
something.
you
I'd be
could
happy
provide
to do
that.
an endorsement. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes.
So I know it's only Wednesday this week, but boy, this week has been defined by the three things I love talking about: family, faith, friendship. And I'm going to throw in rice and beans, and I'm going to share with you what that is. I talked about my faith. I started the week off with the Lenten retreat, which of course was very meaningful for me. I will say, and I mean this in a positive way, so I don't want it to come across as negative. It takes a lot out of me. I will say I was
Mm,
exhausted by the end of the evening,
mm,
and a lot of that has to do with just being on my feet, being on. I
mhm,
don't know if I'm much of an extrovert. I definitely think I'm more of an introvert, but I can be when I need to be.
mhm,
But when I'm exhausted afterwards, I feel like that is the sign of a really great experience.
mm.
Because what I find, I was there for so many hours and a couple hours even afterwards, talking to people where they're sharing these really
Oh,
emotional stories and sharing experiences that they've had or what they connected with. And I find that so meaningful.
mhm,
Exhaustion is, that's probably the wrong word. I need to find a term. If
hmm.
there isn't one, I'm going to create one for positive fatigue, right? Something where you've
Yeah,
given everything you have in such a positive way that you just are tired. And again,
yeah.
not in a negative way. So that was really meaningful. When we get to the spiritual stew, I'm going to talk about the funeral that I went to and what that meant. But then I've had two other opportunities to share my story this week. One at a faith-based school, one at a secular school, and both of those were really meaningful too. So being able to share my story in the faith-filled way. But I have to tell you, Anne,
Hmm.
the secular school I was at, when I was done with my presentation, I was invited by a women's empower group. So it was because it's
Okay.
Women's History Month. They had a
Yeah.
woman speaker. I shared my story. I did not share any part of my faith journey. But one of the first students to come up to me afterwards shared with me the faith experience that she had listening to me speak, and spoke about how she felt as though God was present and she can imagine that people were praying for me. And I had not mentioned any of that. And I thought,
Wow.
wow, this, I don't even have to say the word faith or prayer or anything. And that is how she received it. And so I loved that from this particular school. And then, so spent time with my Notre Dame family, spent time in my faith. And then I have to say, I made a new friend today that I didn't know I had. And this is a story that brought me to tears. It might have made me emotional because I am tired from a long few days. But last week, there is a woman who is fairly new to working at St. Anne's where I am. She's a custodian. She does a lot of the cleaning for us, and so I don't know her well. I say hi to her in the hallways. We've spoken. I know her name, and I walked into the kitchen last week, and anytime I walk into the kitchen, there's always distinct smells during lunchtime, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not, but whatever she was heating up smelled so good, and I told her that. I said, that smells amazing. And she said, all she said was rice and beans. And not almost in an apologetic way, but almost in it's just rice and beans. And I said, oh my gosh, I
Hmm.
love rice and beans, because I do. And she said, oh, I have tortillas too. And I said, it smells amazing. And that was really the end of our conversation. I had to get to a meeting. Fast forward to today, and she walks into my office with a grocery bag,
No.
and she hands it to
Oh,
me and says,
what?
lunch.
Oh.
And my first thought was, I didn't bring lunch today. I didn't leave my lunch anywhere. And she said, rice and beans. And
Oh.
I just stood up and gave her a hug. She made
Ah,
homemade rice and beans and homemade tortillas, and
And she
brought them
thought
to
of
me for
you to
lunch.
bring it.
Isn't that amazing?
That is so, it
I
is,
now have this friend for life that I
yeah.
didn't know I had, and I'm not, and I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
I needed. But it is one
Mm,
of the kindest
it
gestures I think
is.
anyone has done for me in a really long time. And
Yeah.
I ate them for lunch. She gave me a lot. I'm going to have them for dinner again. It was so moving
Mm-hmm.
and such a
Yeah.
great reminder during Lent of
Mm,
how to be a servant.
mm. Yeah. It is, that is like the most, if we're to, unpack that as I'm listening to it, like your reaction, like, there's so many times I go in there and I just say hello and I don't, but you are like, this is amazing. And you clearly had some enthusiasm or joy with it. But that she thought to come back and bring it is just, that's truly kindness. Like there's
True
nothing in it for her other
kindness.
than to make you happy
True
and knowing
kindness.
that you would enjoy that.
Yes.
That is just, and it's so unexpected, right?
So unexpected and made my day. Truly made my week.
Yes. Food has that power. It does.
That's true.
It does. Like
That's
few
true.
things, right? I mean, we were talking about that as faculty. Somebody put in free food in the faculty workroom and
You're right there.
people show up. But this
Yes.
person showed up. She did more than show up. She came to you and remembered and thought of you and brought it for you. So that's great. I love that you have that new friend.
When I think of the person I want to be and strive to be,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
it. That is it.
Yep. Yes. That's a great story,
Yeah.
great model, great example. And its simplicity is real love. I mean, it was made with love too.
It
I
was
always say
made with
that. My
love.
friend and I,
It was
when
made
it's
with
made with
love.
love, it just tastes better.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move us on to our spiritual stew. We've got a lot
Do
to
it.
still talk about. So I did go to a dear friend's funeral, a celebration of life on Monday. It was a funeral mass. I made a day trip to South Bend. It was a very long day. I was up at 4 a.m. and home at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And my son texted me when I boarded my flight and texted our group chat and said, heading home. And he said, "Wow, you made a day trip to South Bend?" And I said, "Yes, sometimes that's just what you
Yeah.
do." And I
Yeah.
would not have missed it. It was a sad day. It was a hard day,
Mm.
but it was also everything that I love about the community of faith and the community that is Notre Dame. And again, you and I have it at Notre Dame. It's not unique to Notre Dame, but that's where I feel it the most.
Yeah.
And as one friend put it, the sadness of the day was lifted by the connections and the people who came together to support this family that's really hurting, but also to support one another. It really, people came from all
Yeah.
over the country, and that was really comforting. I know for me, and I know it was comforting for the family. But Father Jerry gave the homily, and like you, I've been to a number of funeral masses, and I oftentimes feel like the homily has a few words about the person who's passed, and then they go into kind of a general Catholic homily with scripture and all of that. Father Jerry's homily was so good. It was
Wow.
so personal. He wove it into the scripture readings, but it all related back to our friend and his life and what his wife had shared and what his children had shared. It was truly the best funeral mass homily that I have ever
Wow.
experienced. And I need to
Yeah.
I need to figure out how to get a hold of him and let him know that,
Yeah.
because if it was meaningful and comforting to me, I can only imagine how meaningful it was to the family.
Yes.
But again, just someone who really took the time to think about what would be meaningful for someone else and just went all in on it. It was that, that was family, faith, and friendship in like one day. And that is a gift. You don't always get
Yeah.
that.
I was going to say those very words. That is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And
It really
I
was.
think I have a word for you that resonates with what you were saying about you're exhausted because you've given everything. And it applies maybe here to Father Jerry. Doesn't just, he put some time and effort into that homily. It doesn't just, not like cut and bake, so to speak.
Right.
I think the word is kenosis. So kenosis is like self-emptying, and that's what Jesus did on the cross. He totally gave up himself. So, like total self-gift, and I think kenosis speaks to that. So that's definitely a wonderful gift if you are a priest, to be able to preach and to share a message with a community in such a time of loss and grief, and to find comfort in that message is really the gift of the Spirit. So thank you, Jerry, Father Jerry, and thank you. I mean, it also speaks to this person's life that it was, a story that could be shared in so many meaningful ways. So I'm glad you were able to hear it and tell us about it on Faith Can Do. So my piece of the spiritual stew is just about the power of reconciliation. We offer it at school during Lent. A number of students, we take them as a class, as a prayer service. And I share an office with one of the priests who hears these confessions. And I always just kind of check in, how'd it go? Mm-hmm. And he said, just very thoughtful, really good. And I said, well, what does that mean? A good confession. And he said, just some of the things that students are bringing. And, I'm not asking for him to break any confidence.
Right.
Of course, I think that's important. I say that though. Yeah. He said, students will say things like, I want to grow closer in my relationship with God, and I feel like I haven't done that. And what a great thing to speak to somebody, a priest or, a spiritual mentor, but also even in the sacrament to bring to God. An awareness of the importance of kindness. Students saying, I'm not kind to my siblings. So we hear you share a story of kindness, but, a really sorrowful heart for not being kind, and that there's an opportunity to do that again. So, I think with confession, it's important not to be like too scrupulous, but I've had students say, I don't really have anything to confess. And I'm always like, okay, like, I think there is, like, let's unpack that. And
let's dig a little deeper.
Some examples. Yeah. And myself included. I mean, I'm not saying that like I get it and you don't, but it's like, yeah, maybe it is worth confessing. Like, I haven't given my all to my relationship with God, and I am sorry for that. So what a good thing to bring to Lent, because that is my takeaway. For the week or the next 2 weeks, I do need to go to confession or just seek opportunities in my parish to, get involved, but ideally to go to confession and just, it doesn't have to be this week. It might be in the next few weeks, but considering in my mind and my heart, what is it that I want to reconcile? What is it that, I do need to do better? And I have missed the mark. As we know, the definition of sin is to miss the mark. So
you mentioned you share an office with a priest.
Yeah.
Would you have like a confession in a box there? You could go to confession every day.
I could, and I wouldn't mind with him because he's that type of person.
Right.
But, this, when you work with a priest, they're a coworker. He's Jack. He's not Father Jack.
Okay. Fair enough.
But he could be if I needed it, but yeah, it's like you're relating to, it's funny. I guess I hadn't thought of him that way, but yeah, we have a small office too. So it'd be a very easy confessional.
Well, just keep that in mind if we get to Holy Week,
yes,
and
right.
And you haven't gotten there.
I still haven't gone. Yeah, like, hey, Haley, right? Made a little reminder. So, yeah.
So
and how about you?
So my takeaway is similar to what we talked about last time, but I'm going to add a little twist in it in honor of my new friend. So one of the things, and my takeaway from last time when we were talking about Lou Holtz and remembering him, was the gift that he had of making you feel important, and the gift that he had of just listening to you in the moment and being present, and really made you feel like you were the only person he wanted to speak to at that time. And I will tell you, I thought of him and reminded myself of that at the Lenten retreat, when there was a number of people that I spoke with afterwards. And that's hard, but it was a really good reminder for me, because when it's 8:30 at night and I can see, 10, 15 people standing around waiting, and I know they're waiting because they have something important they want to share, I want to also make sure that I'm honoring the person who's speaking to me at that time and honoring
Yeah.
their sharing.
Right.
And so I was very intentional about that. And I'm so grateful that we had just had that conversation and that I was reminded of that gift that Lou had, because it is a gift.
Mm.
And I don't think anyone felt impatient by it, because I'm hoping what they felt when we were connecting was that they did have my full attention. So I was
Mm.
so glad we had that conversation. And that, so
Yeah.
my goal is to continue to do that, especially when I'm
Yep.
to be very present in every conversation I have. And then I am going to surprise someone in a thoughtful way. I'm going to have a rice and beans moment, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know what it looks like, and I don't know who it's going to be, but I am trusting the Holy Spirit to bring something in my path that leads me to it. But I really, that was such a moment of joy for me, and I would
Yeah.
love to pass that along.
I love it. I love that you named it. It's your rice and beans moment. That's a good hook. It's a great story. And I think that's a worthy takeaway for all of us. So
Well,
pay
stay
it forward,
tuned.
rice and beans, etc.
Absolutely. Pay forward rice and beans. I can do it on a Friday because, there's no meat
Yeah,
involved.
true.
But we are halfway through Lent, as you said, or at least close to halfway. We will be
I think
back
so.
before Easter Sunday. I can't say before Holy Week. It might be Holy Week, but
Right.
I will be praying for everyone and praying for you, praying that you get to confession at some point. If not, you can tap Father Jack on the shoulder. But certainly I'm glad to be able to connect and look forward to connecting again soon.
Thanks, Haley. Thanks for your stories and for, your ongoing gift of self. Good kind of tired. I like it.
Good kind of tired. God bless.